Okay, my brother, let me school you on the truth of all this. Yeah, because I tried to talk to my mom about this, but she said everything you're saying is a lie. Of course she did. Yeah, she doesn't really know, but I talked to my man too, and he said he wanted to hear you out. Yeah, I wanted to understand more. Righteous, my brothers. Let's chop it up then. Look at this meme. This is the basis of the truth right here. Jesus, story written down 2,000 years ago. Horus, story written down 5,000 years ago. Jesus, born of the Virgin Mary. Horus, born of the Virgin Isis. Jesus, birthday is celebrated on December 25th. Horus, birthday is on December 25th. Jesus, North Star led wise men to him when he was born. Horus, Eastern Star led 3 wise men to him when he was born. Jesus, taken to Egypt to escape the wrath of Herod. Horus, taken to Egypt to escape the wrath of Typhon. Jesus, taught in the temple as a child. Horus, taught in the temple as a child. Wow, this is real deep. Yes, brother, it really is. Okay, all this is interesting, but this is just a meme. Where did you get all this info from? I mean, if I want to understand Jesus, I can read the Bible and choose to believe it or not. But with all that you're saying, where did you learn all this from? Do you read hieroglyphs? Nah, brother, I don't read hieroglyphs. But this is just knowledge that has been kept from us to keep us believing in a white Jesus lie. He ain't coming back for us, and he ain't saving you. The Bible was made to control you, my brother. Okay, but how can I learn all this on my own? Where did you start? Just Google it. There's a ton of information on the internet you can look into. So many videos that talk about it. Yeah, for real. I've been reading all that info on the internet, and it's all crazy deep. I love the way you break it down, though. He hasn't said anything, though. This is the hidden knowledge that they want to keep from you. You don't have to believe in no white Jesus. You can liberate yourself and free your mind from those lies. Believe in the gods of your ancestors. I'm just asking for sources. Primary sources, to be exact. You say the Bible was written by man, and you don't believe it. But why do you believe all this other information that was written by man as well? Son, why is this hard for you to believe? I've been going to church all my life, and no one can give me answers. The pastor drives a Benz while my mom takes a bus, and she gives him money every week. The slave masters taught our ancestors to believe in Jesus, and they just passed it down. I don't get why you don't believe it. I'm just asking for proof. I want to do my own research away from the internet. I don't think we can say what is fact or not without real study. And no offense, brother, but you haven't given me facts, but statements and suggestions. But you can't tell me where they come from. This is all very deep stuff. I came here for answers, though. But now I just have more questions. You just need to get the knowledge, my brother. It sounds like we all do. When I was presented with so much of this information earlier on in life, there was a time that I had to come to terms with the statements and accusations made. I was confronted by multiple people that would ask me to consider these points and more. But I was never able to be convinced by them because there was always a shortage of facts and information. Most of this information has just been passed around and given to people that want to believe it. But it's never communicated through true research. And so I had to really take time to analyze what was being presented, and I decided that I wasn't going to listen to accusations, but understand truth from research facts. In the first part of this discussion, we went through the reasons why people have turned over to these ancient Kemetic teachings. There are a lot of falsehoods that have been spread as truth, and many people have eaten them up. We went over many of the untruths and accusations that many people have passed along as fact. And what was determined was that when digging deep into these statements and proponents of confusion, when we look deeper into them, we are clearly able to understand the differences, and that true biblical belief in Messiah Yahshua is not something copied from ancient Egypt, but a truth that stands completely on its own. But it is not enough for me to just make blanket statements like this. If you're going to be convinced, it needs to be discussed, so that the lies are no longer looked at as facts, and more can truly understand why the truth that must be learned and followed is all found in the Bible. We are going to cancel out the lies and stand on a solid foundation of truth. Let's begin. So, there's many things to dissect in this topic. It's hard to really know where to start in the discussion. I guess I will just go at the biggest piece of confusion that has been brought forth, and that is that Jesus, Yahshua the Messiah, is a copy of the Egyptian god Horus. One of the best ways to evaluate whether one deity is a copy of another is to evaluate a sketch of their life, which helps mitigate against cherry-picking, misleading language, and the ignoring of differences. This is one reason why it's so easy to concretely say that the Greek and Roman gods are just a retake of the Egyptian Sumerian pagan gods. But Yahshua, when examined from the truth found in Scripture, and not what man has placed on him, is easily seen to be not connected to those pagan gods. So let's discuss Horus from the ancient Egyptian perspective. Using a very standard source, the Encyclopedia of Religion, in reference to Horus, says, in ancient Egypt, there were originally several gods known by the name Horus, but the best known and most important from the beginning of the historic period was the son of Osiris and Isis, who was identified with the king of Egypt. According to myth, Osiris, who assumed the rulership of the earth shortly after its creation, was slain by his jealous brother Seth. The sister wife of Osiris, Isis, who collected the pieces of her dismembered husband and revived him, also conceived his son and avenger, Horus. Horus fought with Seth, and despite the loss of one eye in the contest, was successful in avenging the death of his father and in becoming his legitimate successor. Osiris then became king of the dead, and Horus king of the living, this transfer being renewed at every change of earthly rule. The myth of divine kingship probably elevated the position of the god as much as it did that of the king. In the 4th dynasty, the king, the living god, may have been one of the greatest gods as well, but by the 5th dynasty, the supremacy of the cult of Ra, the sun god, was accepted even by the kings. The Horus king was now also son of Ra. Horus was usually represented as a falcon, and one view of him was as a great sky god whose outstretched wings filled the heavens. His sound eye was the sun, and his injured eye the moon. Another portrayal of him, particularly popular in the late period, was as a human child suckling at the breast of his mother Isis. The two principal cult centers for the worship of Horus were at Bekdet in the north, where very little survives, and at Edfu in the south, which has a very large and well-preserved temple dating from the Ptolemaic period. The earlier myths involving Horus, as well as the ritual performed there, are recorded at Edfu. I don't think that the majority that recognize Horus would debate what I just read, so I think this is a good starting point. Just for some clarity, the temple at Edfu is an Egyptian city located on the west bank of the Nile River, between Esna and Aswan. Edfu is the site of the Ptolemaic temple of Horus and an ancient settlement. Of all the temple remains in Egypt, the temple of Horus at Edfu is the most completely preserved. Now, if you just reviewed this information, none of this information even correlates with Yahshua. But we need to be thorough. The information that we know about Horus comes from a variety of archaeological sources. What we do know from the most recent study on the subject is that there were many variations of the story. Each of the stories popularized at different times and places throughout the span of ancient Egyptian history. Egyptologists recognize the possibility that these differences may have been understood as aspects or facets of the same divine persona of this pagan god, but they either way refer to Horus. Over the course of 5,000 years, several versions or aspects of Horus crop up and die down, giving mythicists almost limitless material to cherry pick from throughout history, and then mix in convoluted ways to make Horus appear as Jesus-like as possible. Part of the problem with the Jesus is Horus claim is that in order to find items that even partially fit the life story of Yahshua, advocates of this view must cherry-pick bits of myths from different periods of time in Egyptian history. They get from here, then they pick from there, then they pick from here. You see, this is possible today because modern archaeology has given us extensive knowledge of Egypt's religious beliefs and how they changed over time. making it possible to cite one detail from this version of a story and another from that one. Today we can go through all of the archaeological findings and then understand what they believed during the different time periods. But the early believers in Yahshua, even if they had wanted to base the Gospels on all the Horus myths, which they didn't, there was no way for them to do this. They might have known what was believed about Horus in the Egypt of their day, but they would have no access to the endless variations of the stories that lay buried in the sands until archaeologists started digging them up in the 1800s. There are several primary sources where anyone would gather information on Horus. We have the Shabaka Stone, which is located in the British Museum. The Shabaka Stone is a heavy, nearly black slab of green breccia. It is named after the black pharaoh Shabaka, who ruled in the 25th dynasty. For some context in dynasties, it is said that Moses existed in the 19th dynasty. Then there is the pyramid texts, which are the oldest known corpus of ancient Egyptian religious texts dating to the Old Kingdom. They were carved onto the subterranean walls and sarcophagi of pyramids at Saqqara Pyramid from the end of the 5th dynasty and throughout the 6th dynasty of the Old Kingdom and into the 8th dynasty. The pyramid texts were reserved only for the pharaoh and were not illustrated. Following the earlier Palermo stone, the pyramid texts marked the next oldest known mention of Osiris, who will become the most important deity associated with afterlife in the ancient Egyptian religion. Then there are the Coffin Texts, which are 1185 spells, incantations, and other forms of religious writing inscribed on coffins to help the deceased navigate the afterlife. The texts were derived in part from the pyramid texts I just mentioned, and they inspired the later work known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You may hear people mentioning this often, but just understanding this Book of the Dead with all the spells and incantations to help one into the afterlife, if you understand the Bible, it's easy to see that none of that correlates with the Bible at all. But let's keep going. There is also the great Osiris statue found in the Louvre in Paris, and the magical stela, Sippus of Horus, found in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the Ptolemaic Temple of Horus found at Edfu. These would be the sources that someone would be citing when discussing the beliefs of Horus in Egypt. It's not like these artifacts were highly used and around during the times of the beginning of the church. So to say that the early church used these artifacts is unfounded and not based upon facts. But like I said in the first part of this, the person that is dissecting the true faith, the way, what they should not do is do a comparison of beliefs just by names in certain traditions, but by the faith, belief, and characteristics. So let's examine beliefs in Horus. Horus in ancient Egyptian religion was a god in the form of a falcon, whose right eye was the sun, representing power and excellence, and whose left eye was the moon, representing healing. Like I explained earlier, Horus appeared as a local god in many places and under different names and characteristics. For instance, and please forgive my pronunciations, as Harmachis, Horus in the horizon, Harpocrates, Horus the child, Harsisis, Horus son of Isis, Harakit, Horus of the horizon, closely associated with the sun god Ra. The Egyptians believed that the pharaoh was the living Horus. Horus was the god of the sky. Like I explained earlier, when his uncle Set murdered Osiris and contested Horus's heritage, the royal throne of Egypt, Horus became Set's enemy. Horus eventually defeated Set, avenging his father and assuming the rule. In the fight, Horus' left eye, i.e. the moon, was damaged, which we know as the Eye of Horus. We must be very clear that none of this story is biblical. It's not found anywhere in the scriptures. If Yahshua was a rebranding of ancient Egyptian beliefs in Horus, this story should be at least similar. We do not see Yahshua fighting anyone, and even when he was confronted in the wilderness by Satan, he did not fight a physical battle, but through speaking the word of the Most High. It is asserted that Horus was born of a virgin, as Yahshua was born of Mary. But this claim of Horus is not based upon truths. The actual legend of Horus' birth is that after Set murdered Osiris, he chopped his body up and scattered his body. It is said that Isis managed to retrieve all of Osiris' body parts except for his phallus, which was thrown into the Nile and eaten. Isis used her goddess powers to temporarily resurrect Osiris and make a golden phallus. She was then impregnated, and Horus was conceived. This is not a virgin birth. Isis was not a virgin, and this does not correlate at all with the biblical story of Yahshua. Another assertion is that Horus died and rose again. This assertion is another one that is based upon claims and not by understanding. It is not claimed that as an adult, Horus died and then rose again. What the actual claim is, in regards to Horus being an adult, is that because Osiris was killed and magically was able to create Horus through Isis, then Horus was actually Osiris reborn. But also, on the magical stela, it is said that as a child, Horus died because of a sting from a scorpion, but the god Thoth set a great spell which restored Horus to life. This is not similar at all to Yahshua, who willingly gave up his life as a man, and he was not resurrected by some spell. None of this is similar to the Bible. Yahshua died for the sins of man. 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 18 says, "Because even Messiah once suffered for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to Elohim, having been put to death indeed in flesh, but made alive in the spirit." Yahshua is our true Savior. Horus is a pagan figure that leads to Lucifer. There are so many bogus assertions that both Horus and Jesus were born in a cave. This is false. Horus was born in the Delta swamps and Jesus in a stable. Another assertion that both births were announced by an angel. This is also false, as the concept of the angel, a messenger of God, is absent from Egyptian beliefs. Also, that Horus and Jesus both raised the dead back to life. False. Horus had nothing to do with raising Osiris or anyone else from the dead. Egyptian religious beliefs would have rejected any such concept as a dead person returning to life on earth. Even Osiris, the great god and first king, was not allowed to return to his place on earth after death. He took his place among the dead, where he belonged. The Egyptian understanding of earthly life was that it was only one part of a much longer eternal journey, and no one would have been welcomed back who had already departed for the afterlife. Or another assertion that Jesus is born on December 25th, and so is Horus. But this is false, because the Bible does not speak of the date of the birth of the Messiah at all. It does not even mention celebrating his birth in any way. So whatever is done in regards to celebrating his birthday is an error of man. It has nothing to do with the Bible. And it should be noted that if Yahshua was really a rebranding of Horus, December 25th or something similar should be cited somewhere in the scriptures. There are too many debunked assertions on this subject, but unfortunately, when people are looking for a reason not to believe, they won't dig any deeper after they hear what they were trying to hear. The true fact is that these main assertions made in the modern day stem from the blasphemous documentary Zeitgeist. But the question is where Zeitgeist got its information from. And if we can answer that question, we may be able to better understand where all this confusion started from. The study of ancient Egypt is actually a fairly recent study. Modern Egyptology really begins with the French campaign in Egypt and Syria, initiated by Napoleon Bonaparte around 1798. Among other things, the French established a scientific exploration of the region. In 1799, a soldier named Pierre-François Bouchard discovered the Rosetta Stone, which contained a bilingual text that eventually led to the translation of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Prior to this, our knowledge of ancient Egypt's 5,000-year history was limited to what was known through the writings of pre-Christian Greek historians, such as Herodotus and Strabo. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone led to a renewed interest by the Europeans in all things ancient Egypt. It was not until nearly a century later that Egyptology, as an academic discipline, began to come into its own. Since that time, we have a much better understanding of ancient Egyptian history and culture. And from this is where the doctrine of confusion was created. When researching the supposed Egyptian influences on Christianity, inevitably one comes across the name Gerald Massey. Massey was an English poet and amateur Egyptologist who lived from 1828 to 1907. He is the author of 3 books on the subject: The Book of the Beginnings, The Natural Genesis, and Ancient Egypt, The Light of the World. His books represent some of the earliest attempts to draw comparisons between the Christian and Egyptian religions. From him, other writers attempting to draw these Jesus-Horus comparisons frequently cite his work. If you come across this doctrine of a Jesus-Horus connection, it is a high percentage that the knowledge that you are hearing was inspired by Mashiach. The many writings that were made after his work often have cited him in their research. He is a big founder of these falsehoods. I find it funny and ironic that people want to discredit the Bible and say that the Bible was written by man so they won't believe it. But they will wholeheartedly believe in another man who inspired all these other false claims. You can literally pinpoint many of these conclusions to him as the source. So when you are confronted by someone who says that Jesus is a rebranding of Horus, ask them to cite their sources. Then if they have actual sources, walk it back to see where their sources are getting their information. More often than not, you will see the influence of Gerald Massey. Listen, a person can believe what they want to believe in. If a person chooses to denounce their faith in the Bible and attach themselves to Egyptian beliefs, then that is their decision. But what they should not do is attach falsehoods to support their decision. Now, I don't think that the majority do this, but are just influenced without doing their own due diligence and checking sources. But in the end, it does not matter. There are lies being spread that are not remotely based in truth. The real truth of this subject is that everyone converting to these beliefs are being conditioned to accept the religion of the New World Order that says that everyone is worshiping the same God. That is the true purpose of this false doctrine, and it is highly unfortunate that so many people are falling for it. Our faith in Messiah is not built upon pagan beliefs about the afterlife. Nothing about the Bible speaks on these things in the way that the pagans believed. Greece believed similarly to Egypt, just with different versions of the story and different names. The same with Rome. Even Egypt has plagiarized their beliefs. There is no other belief than the way that claims that believing in Horus or Apollo or Muhammad is the only way to our Creator. John chapter 14 verse 6 says, Yahshua said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 5 says, For there is one Elohim and one mediator between Elohim and men, the man Messiah Yahshua. Isaiah chapter 53 verse 5 prophesies and says, But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our crookedness. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. None of this resembles Horus. Like I said in the first video, when you go into the details, you will see stark differences. People are being deceived by untruths that sound like facts. They wanted to disbelieve, and this false connection between Jesus and Horus gives them the excuse they need. I started this video off with the conversation between the guys, because the guy asking for sources will be many of us. What I ask is that when you're confronted with this information, do not run or shy away from it, but press on with it. If they say that whatever they believe is correct, they now have the burden to prove it to you. Push them to be specific and cite their sources. Push them to show you the hieroglyphs that support their claims. Don't let them scare you away. That only empowers the lies. Push for clarity, because the majority does not have it. They only have attached themselves to views that others have promoted to them without providing actual facts. If you push for truth, more times than not, that person will say they have more studying to do, and you should in turn use that opportunity to study with them and reintroduce them to the truth. There is no connection with the beliefs found in the Bible and the Egyptian pagan beliefs, or any other belief for that matter. Yahshua is the way, the truth, and the life, and it is him that we must dedicate our lives to learning about and following. Let's not let anything stand in the way of this. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please don't forget to like this and share it with others. If you have not done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Elohim willing, I upload every Friday. Don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. As always, I really would like to thank all who support this ministry. You know who you are. Your contributions have been an extreme blessing, and I am very thankful for you. Thank you for being a blessing to this ministry. Okay, thanks again everyone for watching. I love you all.